Hey all, thanks so much for checking out this section of the strongest Earth in the multiverse yet again. Just reminding everybody that if you're at all confused about the updated art used for Dipper, Mabel, Gideon, and Wendy, I explain all of that in part 3 of the series. And if you want to make sure you're in touch with all the changes to the character's lore, check out part 1. With all that said, I'm your captain, and it's a pleasure to take you on another tour of the strongest Earth in the multiverse. Let's crack on in, y'all. Steel Samurai, Rain Dance, Ben shouted as they left the theater. Hope leapt beside him, making a slashing motion with her empty popcorn bag. Explosion of 1,000 raindrops, she said in the most dramatic tone she could manage. You definitely got the choreography down, Pat. Ben grinned as he walked beside her. I'm pretty cool like that, she smiled. Probably helps that my mom used to work in Hollywood. Whoa, so what, you're Hollywood royalty? Ben asked. He had a really good time tonight. Charmcaster Hope was actually a blast to be around. She knew just as much about the Steel Samurai as he did. And just like him, she couldn't bring herself not to talk during the movie. They both even pointed out the same Easter eggs. A true star in the making, as you can see. Keep a watch out for Hollywood's next blockbuster, Steel Samurai vs. Charmcaster, she joked. When you both team up to take on the evil magistrate's infinite legion, Ben offered. Earning a grudging respect for each other along the way? Of course, gotta hit people with the emotional angle. Ben replied. Speaking of the emotional angle, Charmcaster said, turning to Ben. I had a good time tonight. Oh, yeah, me too, Ben replied casually. I'm glad, Hope replied, grinning. So, does that mean you want to hang out again? Sure, I don't see why not. Ben smirked, kinda glad to have nothing weird happen tonight. No spells, no aliens, just a night out with a friend. It had been a while since something like that was even on the table. He didn't realize how much he needed it lately. Gwen and Dipper were probably going to be relieved too. Nothing weird on the horizon. So, how'd it go? Gideon asked, as Charmcaster came back into the tent. Normal, Charmcaster replied. Normal in the sense that... Gideon began. I'm gaining his trust, Charmcaster replied quietly. Everything according to plan. Oh, well aren't y'all the clinical sort? You don't have to be cool with me. It's alright if you're having a good time. I am. He grinned, sitting on top of the table next to her, popping a peppermint in his mouth. I think I might assign myself my little old soulmate. Charmcaster grabbed him by the blazer, pulling him mere inches away from her face. He made himself very clear about what he wants, she said. He wants the totems not to be a threat. If Mabel's with little old me, she's not gonna be. I'll pull her to our side. And if you can't, I'm gonna. Gideon smiled confidently. But I'll play along. If I can't, then we just get closer to them. Feed the man all their little secrets. Charmcaster dropped him. She hated working with this idiot. He clearly didn't grasp the concept that triangle wanted those people dead. It wanted their lives in ruin. Gideon's first option of winning them over was the only way that they could maybe make them stop being totems. Maybe a way out of this that they were able to keep them alive. But either way, they'd have to get closer to them. There was no way out of that. Not if she was going to save. She had a mission. And she needed to follow through. Sooner rather than later. Probably the next meeting. Even if she did have fun with Tennyson tonight. And he was the one person that she had gotten to goof off with in years at this point. You better have arranged to see that girl again, Charmcaster replied. Of course I did. We even have a little date. It's not a date, Mabel said, as she sat side by side with her brother, deciding the fate of the Earth realm in Mortal Kombat. I just didn't want to break the guy's heart. One-time thing, honest. Mabel, it doesn't work that way. He's gonna fall in love with you, Dipper replied. Come on, I'm not that lovable, she grinned as she landed the final blow on her brother. Finish him, she said, in tune with the TV, as Dipper groaned. Well, at least we agree on something, Dipper admitted, turning his head away from what Scorpion was about to do with Liu Kang, as he glanced to the corner. Dipper turned to Ben, who was already packing up for his night out on the town with his friend. So, I know that Mabel didn't notice anything with Gideon, but are you sure that you didn't see anything with Charmcaster? Positive. The only thing I noticed was that girl was cooler than most I know. Ben smirked, sticking his tongue out at Gwen. Doofus, Gwen muttered under her breath. At the very least, they didn't get nothing out of the experience. Ben was acting kinda normal again. Well, you aren't out of the woods yet. She might still try something, Gwen replied. She already got me out and away from you guys. If she wanted to attack, she probably would have just done it already, right? Ben asked. I guess so, Gwen admitted. Even so, Dipper said. We probably want to keep looking into her. You guys both said that you got asked out on a date today, right? It wasn't a date, both Mabel and Ben said at the same time. That means you can ask around. See if you can pry any details out of them. Dipper turned to Gwen. So we can know for sure if they're a problem. Do you guys think you can keep your not dates talking for that long? Gwen asked, Ben shrugging as he nodded. Mabel nodded too, just much slower and much more hesitant. Great, just make sure you don't agree to another date, got it? We don't know what you guys will find out there. The last thing we need is Charmcaster and Gideon having another reason to show up around here if you guys do find out that they're dangerous. Yeah, sure, got it. Mabel forced a smile. Almost as though the universe itself was spitting on her, the doorbell to the shack rang. Sliding off the couch, she walked over to the door, flinging it open, only to nearly get trampled to death by a white horse that stumbled through. A night of enchantment awaits, my lady. Gideon gave his best attempt at a charming smile, as he lowered his hand from atop the white horse. Oh no, Mabel muttered, looking around for anyone that might be able to get her out of this. Her brother and Gwen were locked in conversation with Ben. Maybe she could get Ben to make up an excuse, but that hope went away almost immediately with what she saw behind the horse. Charmcaster calmly waiting for Gideon to leave. Looks like Ben was leaving now too. She was doomed. And so I said, autograph your own headshots, lady. Gideon smiled, clearly thinking his anecdote was the most clever thing in the world. Mabel felt herself falling asleep. Was Gideon always this full of himself? Heh, yeah. Mabel tried to force a smile on her face. Well, today's date was a complete success, Gideon said proudly. Mabel smiled politely and nodded. At the very least, she'd done it. She had protected this person's feelings, and at the very least, it was finally over. And she was fairly sure that he wasn't at least dangerous, if not a little creepy these days. And I think tomorrow's date will be even better, his voice rang in her ears. Tomorrow? Mabel felt her chin tighten. At this point, the only thing keeping them in her head was probably her braces. She honestly couldn't tell. Not only did she not want to go out with this guy again anytime soon, she had a pretty good reason not to. But the way he looked at her, the sway he had with the people around him, it was like the entire restaurant was just breathing down her neck. She silently hoped he'd do something evil just so she'd have an opportunity to get up and leave. I really hope Ben's doing better than I am, she muttered to herself. Okay, the movies were fun, but what are we doing up here? Ben asked, looking out over the edge of the town on top of the cliff. It looked kind of familiar, kind of like the one you threw the gnomes off of. Only now it was a lot more peaceful. What, are you scared of a little nature, Tennyson? Hope asked, nudging the boy. Relax, we're just killing some time. Until dinner, anyway. I like looking at the stars, she said, almost wistful. Dinner? Ben asked. Yeah, I made reservations at a place nearby, Hope replied. Then seeing a look of half panic cross Ben's face, she grinned. Relax, Tennyson. I'm not dragging you to a fancy hellhole. Oh, thank goodness, Ben replied. I heard that Gideon was taking Mabel to one, and I really did not want to go through that. Gideon's... I don't really have the words to describe him, Hope began, before shaking the thought off. You know what? No, I do have the words. He's one of the most entitled little snots I've ever met. I don't know how we're the same age when he acts like a frickin' toddler, especially when he doesn't get what he wants. What, like crying? Ben asked. Tears and snot, my man, Hope snickered. But more like tantrums. He literally can't conceive of a world where he doesn't get what he wants. It's infuriating. Then why are you working with him? I mean, you seem a lot more talented at the whole medium thing. Could probably go solo, Ben replied. I probably could, if I just wanted to make money, Hope trailed off. I wish that was all I wanted. She quietly stared up at the sky. She seemed almost agitated at the words coming out of her mouth. Ben fidgeted. Do you wanna talk about it? You want me to talk about my feelings? Hope asked. Just telling you about dinner nearly made you crap yourself. Oh, yeah, Ben rolled his eyes. He scooted a bit closer to Hope. He didn't really know why, or why he was glad that Hope wasn't scooting away. You aren't the only one with stuff you'd rather not talk about. I'm not exactly chomping at the bit to say what's on my mind, but I know how you feel. Actually know how you feel. At least I think I do, Ben replied. His eyes were mostly focused on the forest in front of him, not wanting to look at her. But when he finally did, he saw that the shock in her eyes had mostly faded as he watched understanding take their place. Huh, he actually helped. He didn't really expect that. Wait, he was looking in her eyes. Oh no, that was lovey-dovey crap. No. Those words repeated on loop in his head. He wasn't about to turn into Dipper. He saw how he acted around Wendy. It was, in his mind, the lamest thing ever. He needed an escape route, and quick. Thanks, Hourglass. I don't really want to talk about my thing either, but it's nice to know I'm not alone, I guess. She smiled. Maybe we should get going, she said, a bit more serious, like she had almost changed her mind about something. She looked toward Ben, and saw a strange blank confusion washing over his face. Are you okay there, Tennyson? And the night gets worse, Ben inwardly screamed, backing away from her as he put his hands behind his back. Hourglass. She called him Hourglass, like the gnomes did. His friend was evil. Yeah, totally fine. Are you sure? You're turning green there, she continued. Completely. Couldn't be more calm, Ben said, pressing the dial on his watch behind his back and feeling the face pop up. Yeah, you sure look like it, she said, narrowing her eyes, playing the last few moments in her head on loop. Her eyes widened. Oh, crap. Ben, wait, it's not... She was cut off by a flash of green light as Ben's form was replaced by something in its stead. He hadn't been able to tell what form he'd chosen behind his back, and it was probably the worst one he could have. Ghost freak. Hope took a step back. She heard about the properties of that watch a while back. She never saw it in person, though. She could tell why the pyramid thought he was such a threat. Whatever kind of trap you were laying here, you can forget it. The eye on the creature narrowed. It's hero time. Hope paused, a part of her not wanting to go through with this. But she did. She raised a hand over the land beneath her as it glowed. Dozens of small creatures crawling out of the muck. Dirt monsters with glowing eyes. Believe it or not, I didn't want things to go this way, but I'm gonna do my best not to hurt you. That's a laugh. I was gonna say the same thing, Ghost Freak snarled. Where the heck are they? Gwen fidgeted in her seat, Dipper sitting next to her with the journal open. He didn't look much better. Look, I'm sure they're probably fine, he said, laser focused on his pages. Probably? I don't know. Look, they didn't try anything last time, did they? Dipper asked. That might have just been a ploy so they could try something this time, when we have our guards down, Gwen hissed. Are you always this paranoid? Dipper asked. What, coming from the guy who was convinced that his sister was dating a zombie? I was kind of right, Dipper argued. And I might be... Gwen was so wrapped up in her thoughts that she barely registered her cousin walking back into the mystery shack from outdoors. How'd it go? Dipper replied, as Mabel dropped a lobster in the tank in the corner of the shack. Not great. I have a lobster now, she replied. I'm not really feeling the summer of love, guys. He's so intense, like everything I do is an invitation for romance. And he started getting... Mabel sighed. I can't get a word in with the guy. But he still didn't do anything evil, I guess. So you broke up with him? Dipper asked, hopeful for his sister's sake. From her words, Gideon didn't seem dangerous, he was just a jerk. And if he was dangerous, they definitely didn't need him knocking around the shack. Not exactly. Mabel sat down on the couch next to her. Tell me you didn't, Gwen replied. I had to. Everyone was staring when he asked for another date. What was I supposed to do? Say no? Crush his heart in front of everybody? Yes! Gwen shouted back. Relax, both of you. I'm sure everything's gonna be fine. Dipper replied. You can just stop talking to him or something. Nobody's gonna force you to hang out with him, he said, just as their grunkle wearing a psychic show shirt that hung over his protruding gut walked in. This is bad, right? Gwen asked quietly. Good news, you two. Oh, where's the Tennyson kid? It doesn't matter. You get to marry those psychic folks, Stan shouted, near the top of his lungs. Yeah, this is bad, Dipper responded. It's all part of a new deal I worked out with Gideon's father. We're gonna be rolling in dough. I'm talking as much money as we can get our... Grandpa? Gwen shouted, as both Dipper and Mabel ran outside, as fast as possible, closing themselves in the rust bucket. Max came in a few seconds later, confusion and then irritation evident on his face as he looked at Stan's shirt. What? Stan asked as Max looked toward the kid who was still in the doorway. What did he do? Max said, exasperation seeping in his voice. An arranged marriage, apparently, Gwen replied. Look, I should probably go talk to Dipper and Mabel. Can you handle this? Don't worry, kiddo. I got this. Max ruffled Gwen's hair as he sent her on her way. He cleared his throat as he stared across at his brother, crossing his arms. What? Stan asked, crossing his arms back. Dipper placed a hand on his sister's now hyperventilating body that was buried in a couch in the rust bucket. Mabel, like I said, it's gonna be fine. Gwen, could you help me out here? He asked, staring at his cousin, whose face was practically buried out the window. Mabel's back. Ben's not. Does that not strike you as a problem? Gwen asked. Wait, Ben's still not back? Mabel pulled her head out of the pillow. But they're safe. Gideon didn't try to hurt me. Gideon. Gwen narrowed her eyes, as though she just realized something, taking a step out of the rust bucket. Where are you going? Dipper asked, grabbing her arm. If there is something wrong, I'm gonna go beat it out of the twerp. And if there isn't, well, look at Mabel. Do you think she's gonna break up with him herself? Dipper looked at Mabel, who was still heavily clutching a pillow to her chest. Oh, you got a point. Ben was actually having trouble. He had to make himself tangible to keep destroying those things, and when he did, they'd bat him away like he was nothing. He had cleared through maybe half of them, but they just kept going. Don't you ever get tired, Charmy? Ben murmured out. Not a chance. It would be easier for both of us if you just gave up. And here I thought you knew me, Ghost Freak belted out. He flew towards another golem, possessing it and making it grow in size, bolstering its strength with his own, and using it to smash through a line of other creatures, smashing the ground where Charmcaster was a second after she hopped away from it, only for it to claw at her again, tearing off a piece of her jacket with enough force to be cut clean. Ben? She whispered. She knew this was antagonistic, but she never thought he'd fight like this. It was almost animalistic. He continued striking, her arm, her leg, her gut. She had managed to avoid half of the attacks he dealt out, but the one she couldn't hurt, and hurt bad. She cast another spell, the ground pushing her up into the sky. Ghost Freak left his golem body, floating up after her. She flinched at the menace evident in his eyes, just as the Omnitrix began beeping. Ben floated down as quickly as he could manage before he transformed back, a look of relief crossing his face, one that mixed with horror as he looked down upon the smashed golems that he'd torn up, that he didn't even remember smashing. Man, he hated Ghost Freak. He looked up at Hope's now terrified face as he stared back down to his watch. He almost wanted to apologize. He probably would have apologized if she didn't start this whole thing, but that didn't help his mental state as much as he wanted it to. Ben swallowed hard. He was out of options. He had to win that fight in the 10 minutes that he had Ghost Freak, and he failed. The Omnitrix timed out. There was only one thing to do now. One option. He spun on his heels and he took off as fast as his legs could carry him into the forest behind. Charmcaster stared at him for a moment, shaking off the last bits of shock before she narrowed her eyes and began her pursuit. Well, if it isn't the Pine Senescence, Gideon said, his back facing the two who had just entered his tent. I wasn't expecting y'all. What can I do for you? Where's Charmcaster? Gwen asked, Dipper clenching his fist behind his back. He wasn't much of a fighter, but he was willing to give it a shot. Well, how should I know? She went out with your brother, just asked. He didn't come home, Gwen replied, coldly. Gideon stiffened, inwardly cursing himself. Charmcaster was always so serious. He just hoped she didn't rush anything. Oh, is that so? Well, Charmy and him might just been having a good time. I assure you, the last thing we want is to bring y'all any pain. He turned around, the same sickening sweet smile on his face that he wore during the show. It seemed to hang a little bit differently in this light. Almost sinister. Is that so? Dipper asked. Of course. We only want the best things for our friends. Then, where is she? Gwen asked, taking a step even closer to Gideon, now close enough to catch a glimpse of an old paper behind his mirror. A paper that looked almost eerily similar to the pages of Dipper's journal. Now, I assure you, ma'am, I can just call her. Gideon began, his eyes lighting up with the idea. Yeah, just give her one little ring. He fumbled for his phone, dialing a number as he stood up, walking away from Gwen, holding the phone as close to his face as possible. Gwen ignored him. Sure, she wanted to hear the other end of that call, but not more than she wanted to know what was on that paper. She reached for it, pulling it out, as Gideon whispered into his device. What are you doing? Gideon hissed. What you're supposed to. Hope's voice rang on the other end. What happened to earning their trust? Gideon asked. Charmcaster was silent for a moment. It didn't work. They're smarter than you think, she said quietly. And you're not making as great an impression as you think you are. I'll have you know I'm charming, Gideon half shouted into the phone. As charming as lead poisoning. She hung up. Gideon's eye twitched as he shook the phone, desperately trying to compose himself as he turned back to the others. He didn't need to. Gwen and Dipper stared at the paper that he didn't hide as well as he thought. There wasn't any way talking his way out of this, at least not now. Mabel doesn't want to date you anymore, Dipper said, as he nervously locked eyes on Gideon, whose eyes twitched at his words. He was wrong. This guy was dangerous, which meant Charmcaster was too, which meant Ben was off fighting her somewhere by himself. The situation was much, much worse than they imagined. I'm gonna ask you one more time. Where is Charmcaster? Gwen said, taking her makeshift spellbook out of her bag. Oh, I'm afraid I don't know. But I'm sure we'll meet up again soon, after this. He snapped his fingers, the clown troop stumbling in. I think it's time for you to meet the rest of our little family. Wanna play, Zombozo? The clown looked over at Gideon, his yellow teeth widening into a pointy grin. I'd love to. Come on, you stupid watch, Ben shouted, nearly dodging another bite from an earth golem. He couldn't hide in the trees. She was ripping them out by the roots, by the dozen with her weird telekinetic powers. You're an alien watch. Aliens made you. This kind of thing never happens to Superman. Ah! He fell to the side, a golem finally managing to tackle him, pushing him into a tree hard enough to crack it. Hope floated down, Ben grunting as he stared at her. I guess that's what I get for thinking I made a normal friend, Ben mumbled. Or a friend in general, Ben's mind said at him. Hope stared down at Ben. Save it, Ben replied, slowly pushing himself to his feet. At least the gnomes came clean to Mabel. How long were you gonna pretend to be my friend? After a moment of silence between them, when the loudest sound was the wind whistling between their ears, she spoke up again. As long as I had to, she said quietly. Guess I can save the question about you just faking everything then, Ben replied. Charmcaster's fist glowed as she raised it, just in time for Ben's watch to chirp. Round 2. Charmcaster's eyes widened, trying to get him before he could reach his watch. She didn't make it in time, as a light erupted up into the heavens. Let's see if you can take the heat. Mabel walked nervous treads around the shack, around the rust bucket, digging herself further and further into her routine as she thought. They hadn't come back yet. Gideon's shack wasn't that far away. Did that mean they were in trouble? Were all of her family in trouble? She scratched her head. What was she supposed to do? Her thoughts stopped, a light on the hill catching her eyes. A fire. Heat blast. Oh no, she said, scratching her head. Hey all, as always I appreciate you guys coming in to check out this video. Sorry it ended on a cliffhanger again, it's just kind of how things keep turning out. But I really appreciate you guys showing up. It, as always, means a lot to me, and I really enjoyed taking you guys on another tour of the strongest Earth in the multiverse. If you enjoyed, I appreciate it if you'd let me know by giving me a like, or if you could subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss out on the next chapter. Bye now!